Beyond the Gates spoilers tease that Dani and Andre had wounded Ashley's heart in ways she had never imagined possible. It hadn't been one of those clean breaks that could be explained away with a single argument or an irreconcilable difference. This was betrayal in its most intimate form. Andre had made the conscious decision to end things with Dani so that he could be with Ashley, but somehow his body had refused to cooperate with the resolve in his mind. He had played the role of the committed boyfriend with Ashley, taking her out to the places she loved, asking about her day, holding her hand in that casual but meaningful way that said he was there for her. And yet, whenever Dani appeared at his door unannounced, unapologetic, dripping with the seduction she wielded like a weapon, he let her in. He let himself in. It was a cruel contradiction, one that Andre tried to rationalize to himself in the quiet moments after Dani left his apartment, when the sheets still smelled of her perfume. He told himself it was just physical, that the real connection, the real future, was with Ashley. But the moment Ashley would walk into his apartment with that warm smile and those soft eyes that seemed to forgive before they even knew what had gone wrong, guilt would rise in his throat like bile. He swallowed it down and covered it with a kiss. There were times when Ashley's intuition whispered warnings. She noticed little things, a hair clip that wasn't hers on the bathroom counter, a faint scent of a different perfume lingering on Andre's jacket, or the way he sometimes hesitated before answering questions about where he had been. But every time, Andre had a story. The hair clip? His cousin had been visiting. The perfume? He'd walked through a department store. The hesitation? He was distracted by work. And every time, Ashley wanted to believe him, so she did. Love has a way of making lies feel like truths when they come from the lips you trust most. Her trust gave Andre the space to maintain both relationships, though the balancing act was becoming harder to sustain. Dani noticed too. She saw how Andre's texts came less frequently, how his eyes flickered toward his phone when they were together, as if waiting for a message from someone else. She didn't like it, but Dani was not a woman who let go easily. When she wanted something or someone, she fought for it with all the force of her will, and in her mind, Andre was hers. She could forgive his wandering attention, but she would not forgive him leaving. Andre, for his part, tried to set boundaries with Dani. He told her they needed space, that he was trying to focus on his relationship with Ashley. Dani would nod, agree, sometimes even smile as if she understood. And then, days later, she would be at his door again, leaning against the frame with a sly grin, wearing something that seemed designed for no other purpose than to be taken off. His resolve would crumble like sand in the tide. It was on one of those days, one of those moments of weakness, that Ashley arrived without warning. She had been in the neighborhood, had thought it might be nice to surprise him with lunch, maybe watch a movie together before he had to head to work. She didn't knock. She had a key. And as she pushed open the door, laughter floated from the bedroom. The kind of laughter that was intimate, low, and punctuated by the rustle of movement. She stepped closer, her heartbeat quickening, her mind spinning through a dozen possible explanations, each one worse than the last. The door to the bedroom was ajar. Through the narrow gap, Ashley saw Andre and Dani both in their underwear, bodies tangled, the scene so raw and so close that it felt like a punch to her chest. Her breath caught. She didn't think. She just turned and fled, the sound of her footsteps drowned by the blood rushing in her ears. Behind her, Andre called her name, his voice strained, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. Andre took a step toward the door, but Dani's hand on his arm stopped him. She pulled him back with a kiss that was more like a challenge than comfort. "She's gone," Dani whispered, her tone dismissive, as if Ashley were a minor inconvenience in a much larger game. Ashley didn't stop running until she reached her car. She slammed the door, gripped the steering wheel, and broke. The sobs came in waves, her chest tightening with each one until it felt like she couldn't breathe. She didn't care who saw her. The betrayal was total, not just the act itself, but the lies that had built up around it, layer by layer, until the truth had been buried. That night, she didn't answer Andre's calls. The next day, she blocked his number, his social media, every digital avenue he might use to reach her. Andre, panicked, tried showing up at her workplace, but Naomi, her closest friend there, told him she had taken a few days off because she wasn't feeling well. Naomi's eyes, usually warm, were cool when she spoke to him, and Andre knew she suspected something. Ashley stayed home for days, her curtains drawn, phone silenced. She didn't want to eat, didn't want to see anyone, didn't want to talk about it. But Naomi didn't give up. She came over with groceries, knocked until Ashley opened the door. At first Ashley tried to brush it off, mumbling something about being tired, but Naomi's persistence wore her down. The truth spilled out in broken sentences, and Naomi listened without interrupting. When Ashley finished, Naomi let out a slow breath, then confessed something of her own, something she had been hesitant to say because it would only add weight to the hurt. Her mother, Naomi revealed, had been seeing Andre too. Ashley stared at her in shock, not because she thought Naomi was lying, but because she could see the genuine regret in her friend's eyes. It wasn't Naomi's fault, they both knew that, but the revelation still landed like another blow. The fact that Andre's betrayal was wider, more reckless than she had imagined, made her stomach churn. They sat together in silence for a while. Then, as if by unspoken agreement, they decided not to let his actions ruin their friendship. They promised to remain friends, to stand by each other no matter how messy things got. Ashley thought she could put Andre out of her mind entirely, but the universe had other plans. She had been feeling off lately, tired, nauseous at odd hours, a heaviness in her body she couldn't shake. She blamed it on stress, maybe even on eating differently since she'd been skipping meals and then binging comfort food. But a nagging thought kept coming back, one she tried to ignore. When the symptoms didn't fade, she bought a test. She waited until the morning to take it, standing barefoot on the cold tile of her bathroom floor. The seconds stretched into minutes, and when the result appeared, the air seemed to vanish from the room. Positive. Her knees nearly gave out. She sat on the edge of the bathtub, staring at the small plastic stick as if looking long enough might change the result. But it didn't. She was pregnant. And the father was a man who had lied to her, betrayed her, and as far as she was concerned no longer existed in her life. She didn't tell anyone at first. The weight of the secret was heavy, but it was hers. She thought about her options, each one more difficult than the last. Keeping the baby would mean a permanent connection to Andre, a man she wanted to erase from her future. But ending the pregnancy felt like a choice she wasn't ready to make, even though she told herself it might be the cleanest way forward. Everywhere she went, she saw reminders of him, a song on the radio, a scent in the air, a street they'd walked down together. Each reminder twisted the knife a little deeper. Nights were the worst, when the silence in her apartment became so loud that her thoughts had nowhere to hide. Andre still tried to reach her through mutual friends, but she avoided every attempt. Naomi offered to talk to him on her behalf, but Ashley refused. She wasn't ready. She didn't know if she would ever be ready. The idea of seeing his face, hearing his voice, it felt like reopening a wound that hadn't even started to heal. Days turned into weeks, and the decision she had been avoiding loomed larger. She knew she couldn't hide it forever. Sooner or later, the truth about the baby, about everything, would have to come out. But not yet. Under the dim streetlights of the city, Andre stood outside his apartment window one late evening, a cigarette burning slowly between his fingers. He wasn't much of a smoker, never had been, but lately, he needed something to fill the space where Ashley's voice used to be. The air was colder than it should have been for the season, or maybe that was just him. Dani was inside, sprawled across his couch like she owned it, thumbing through a fashion magazine. She had the ease of someone who had decided the war was already won. But Andre wasn't sure what victory even meant anymore. Since that day Ashley had run out of his apartment, her absence had carved something hollow into him. Dani's presence filled the physical space, but it didn't quiet the restlessness that kept him awake at night. He thought of calling Ashley almost every day, rehearsing the words in his mind, but the possibility that she wouldn't answer, or worse, that she would, kept him from dialing. Ashley, meanwhile, had become quieter in her routines, moving through her days like a shadow of herself. Naomi checked on her often, sometimes dropping by unannounced just to make sure she was eating, but Ashley never said much about the thing that weighed most heavily on her. The pregnancy wasn't something she could ignore anymore. The changes in her body were subtle, but growing, an undeniable truth taking shape with each passing week. Naomi noticed, though she didn't push. One afternoon, over mugs of lukewarm tea, she asked gently if Ashley had been feeling all right. Ashley hesitated, fingers tightening around the cup, and Naomi knew. She didn't say the word. She didn't have to. Her silence was the kind of understanding that friends give when the truth is too raw to be spoken aloud. For Ashley, the days ahead were a maze of impossible decisions. There were moments when she thought about disappearing, entirely leaving the city, starting somewhere new where no one knew her story. But then there were moments, late at night, when she'd rest her hand on her stomach and feel an unexpected surge of protectiveness. Those moments terrified her as much as they comforted her. Andre's attempts to reach her through others were clumsy and desperate. He sent messages through Naomi, though Naomi rarely passed them along. She knew Ashley wasn't ready, and part of her didn't think Andre deserved the chance to plead his case. But Dani was watching all of this from the sidelines, and Dani didn't like the way Andre's attention drifted. One evening, Dani confronted him. She'd caught him staring at his phone too long, tapping out a message before deleting it. "You're still thinking about her," she accused, her voice laced with the kind of confidence that came from knowing she was right. Andre didn't deny it. He didn't have the energy to lie anymore. That honesty lit something dangerous in Dani. She had never been the type to share, and the thought of Andre's mind or heart wandering back to Ashley made her restless. She started showing up more often, dragging him to parties, keeping him busy with distractions. But all it did was make the absence sharper when he was alone. Ashley's breaking point came on a rainy Thursday evening. She was leaving a grocery store, hood pulled up, when she saw Andre across the street. He wasn't looking at her, but just seeing him there in the same space made her chest tighten. She ducked into an alley, heart racing, waiting until the sound of his footsteps faded. It wasn't fear that kept her hidden, it was the knowledge that if she faced him now, all the anger and hurt would come spilling out, and she didn't know if she could keep herself from telling him about the baby. Naomi started to worry about how much Ashley was keeping inside. She knew secrets had a way of turning toxic, and this one was heavy enough to crush her if she carried it alone. Late one night, after hours of hesitation, Naomi suggested something she had been avoiding. "Maybe you should tell him. Not because he deserves to know, but because you deserve to be free of this." Ashley didn't answer right away. Her mind was a storm of what-ifs. If she told Andre, would he try to get involved? Would he tell Dani? Would it become another weapon in someone else's hands? And if she kept it from him, could she live with the guilt of making that choice alone? Meanwhile, Andre's restlessness was turning into something more volatile. The silence from Ashley had become unbearable, and Dani's attempts to distract him only fueled his frustration. One night, after too many drinks, he showed up outside Naomi's apartment, demanding to know where Ashley was. Naomi refused to open the door. She told him through the crack in the window that if he cared about Ashley at all, he'd give her the space she needed. But Andre wasn't listening. He was too far gone into his own need for answers. The next morning, Ashley woke to find her phone buzzing with missed calls from Naomi, warning her that Andre was pushing harder than ever to find her. That warning made her realize something. The clock on her decision was running out. Sooner or later, this secret would collide with reality, and she needed to be the one to control how it happened. In the days that followed, Ashley's internal war deepened. She started writing letters to the baby, not to give them away, but to put her thoughts somewhere safe, somewhere Andre couldn't touch. She wrote about her fears, her doubts, the way her life had tilted off its axis since that night. She wrote about strength, to the kind she didn't feel yet, but hoped she would. Andre, sensing he was losing whatever fragile thread still connected them, began plotting his own way forward. He told himself that if he could just see her, just explain, maybe they could find some middle ground. Dani caught him searching for her online, and it set off the ugliest argument they'd ever had. She accused him of being obsessed. He accused her of not understanding. In truth, they were both right. The tension among all three of them was like a tightening wire, and somewhere deep down, each of them knew it would eventually snap. Ashley's decision, Andre's persistence, and Dani's jealousy were on a collision course, and when they met, there would be no going back. What no one knew yet was how far the fallout would reach, or who would be left standing when the truth finally broke free. Ashley's decision came on an afternoon so still it felt unnatural, like the city itself was holding its breath. She had been pacing her apartment for hours, her phone in her hand, scrolling through Andre's number without pressing call. The silence had become unbearable, but more than that, the weight of the secret was crushing her. Naomi's words echoed in her mind, not because he deserves to know, but because you deserve to be free of this. She sat down at her small kitchen table, phone in front of her, staring at it until her reflection blurred in her vision. Her hands were trembling, not with fear of him, but with fear of the chain reaction that would follow. Once the words were spoken, there would be no taking them back. She dialed. It rang longer than she expected, and she nearly hung up before he answered. Ashley? His voice was sharp with surprise, heavy with something unspoken. We need to talk, she said. Her tone was steady, even though her pulse was not. They agreed to meet in a quiet park at dusk, where the wind would carry away their voices. When Andre arrived, he looked like he hadn't slept in days. He took a step toward her, but she held up a hand, stopping him in place. I'm pregnant, she said. No lead up, no cushioning. Just the truth. The silence that followed was long enough for the sun to shift behind a cloud. His face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, realization before settling into something unreadable. Is it mine? He asked, and the bitterness in his tone stung like a slap. Her answer was cold. You know it is. Andre ran a hand over his face, eyes darting to the ground. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because you were with her, Ashley said. Because you lied to me. Because the day I found out was the day I realized you were the last person I wanted to see. He started to speak, but she cut him off. I'm not here to argue about the past. I just needed you to know. What I do next, that's my decision. Andre's jaw tightened, but he didn't press. He seemed to understand that whatever chance he had to influence her choice had been lost long before this conversation. They parted without touching. Word of the meeting didn't take long to reach Dani. She had her ways of finding things out, and when she did, she went straight to Andre's apartment. The moment he opened the door, she demanded to know if it was true. His silence was answer enough. Dani's reaction wasn't the rage he expected, it was something colder, more calculating. You think this changes anything? She asked. You think she's going to take you back because of this? She's not. And if you try to play hero, I will make sure she remembers exactly who you are. Andre didn't respond. He just walked away from her, and for the first time since all of this began, Dani realized she might actually lose him. For Ashley, the days that followed were a blur of appointments and restless nights. She had made her decision, but she wasn't ready to share it with anyone, not even Naomi. She wanted the choice to be hers alone, unshaped by anyone else's guilt or persuasion. On a gray morning 2 weeks later, she stood outside her building, watching the street. Somewhere behind her, her packed bag waited by the door. She wasn't running away, not exactly. She was leaving to give herself room to breathe, to think without the constant hum of other people's expectations. Naomi knew only that she was going away for a while. Andre didn't know she was leaving at all. The last time they spoke, she made it clear that she wasn't ready for his involvement. Whether he listened to that or not, she didn't care anymore. As the car pulled up to take her to the station, Ashley took one last look at the city she'd called home. She felt the faintest flutter beneath her hand, and instead of fear, she felt something else, something almost like resolve. Behind her, in another part of the city, Andre sat alone in his apartment. Dani was gone, not for the night, but for good this time. The emptiness was louder than her voice had ever been. He thought about calling Ashley, about asking where she was, what she planned to do, but he didn't. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the knowledge that he'd already done enough damage. Naomi, caught in the middle of it all, found herself thinking about how quickly lives could shift. In less than a year, friendships had been tested, love had been twisted, and choices had been made that none of them could undo. She hoped Ashley would find peace, wherever she went. Somewhere on a train moving away from the city, Ashley sat by the window, watching the blur of trees and buildings pass. She didn't know exactly where she was going, only that it was away from everything that had been breaking her. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to imagine a future that wasn't defined by Andre, Dani, or the pain they had caused. Whether that future would include the child she carried was a question she would answer in her own time and on her own terms. And far behind her, the gates of her old life closed quietly, leaving only the sound of the rails carrying her toward something new.